Packs tell themselves they are civilized. They draw borders and call it safety. They carve laws into beams and call it order. They punish the wolves who bite too hard, who love too openly, who refuse to kneel. And then they sleep, believing they've carved the wildness out of their blood. But the wild never leaves. It only learns how to wear a face the pack can live with. Vera Ashford learned that truth too late. She learned it on her knees in winter mud, silver burning her skin like confession. She learned it beneath the eyes of wolves who'd watched her grow up and decided, within 20 minutes, that she was easiest to throw away. And she learned it when Alpha Garen did not kill her. Mercy, in Crescent Hollow, was never a gift. It was a leash. Vera didn't understand that at first. Exile sounded like the worst thing they could do. Being cast out sounded like being forgotten. She forgot one simple rule of pack law. Nothing is ever truly released. Not a debt, not a weapon, not a girl who can be used to make a point. And when Garen decided he needed an example, something brutal enough to keep the border wolves obedient and the dangerous ones contained, he didn't reach for his enforcers. He reached for his most feared problem, the pack's rogue, Cale Thorne. Everyone had a story about him. 5 years ago, he'd killed his father in front of half the pack. No trial, no pleading, just blood on the ground and Cale standing over it like a storm that had finally chosen where to strike. They exiled him. They called him Monster. And then, quietly, they kept him. Because monsters are useful, so long as they're chained. So when Vera's trial ended and the crowd began to disperse, when she thought she was being thrown into wilderness to die alone, the pack did something far worse than execute her. They bound her to him, not with fate, not with tenderness, with old magic that didn't care what either of them wanted. Magic that made one promise and kept it without mercy. If one of you dies, the other follows. If one of you runs, the other suffers. And if either of you dares to break the pack's rules, it will make sure you pay. The rope burned, not metaphorically, not like heartbreak burned or shame burned. This was silver-laced cord, threaded through powdered metal and old wards, biting into Vera's wrists until her skin blistered on contact, as if she were something sinful that needed to be punished into obedience. They'd tied her hands behind her back and forced her to her knees in the clearing where Crescent Hollow held trials and executions. The mud had frozen overnight and thawed under weak morning sun, turning into cold slick that soaked through her jeans. Her knees were numb. Her fingers were worse. She'd stopped shivering an hour ago. And that, more than the crowd, more than the platform, more than Alpha Garen's voice, was what frightened her most. Because when your body stops reacting, it means something inside you has decided you're already gone. Garen stood on the platform framed by carved posts and the pack banner snapping in the wind. He wasn't looking at Vera. He was looking past her, as if she were already a lesson finished. 200 wolves watched from the perimeter, some with curiosity, some with disgust, some with that blank hunger people wore when they wanted violence but didn't want to admit it. They were here for a story. They were here to see what kind of ending Vera deserved. "Vera Ashford," Garen said, voice carrying like a branch cracking in quiet forest. "You stand accused of murdering Marcus Thorne, ranked patrol of Crescent Hollow." Marcus. The name turned her stomach. Not because she felt guilt, not because she felt innocence, but because her mind kept trying to run the last memory like a thumb worrying a bruise. Marcus beside her in the trees. Marcus laughing under his breath, telling her she worried too much. Marcus splitting off to circle north while she took the eastern line. And then, nothing. A blank where time should be, a hole punched through her night. Garen's gaze finally landed on her, and Vera realized with cold clarity that it didn't matter what she remembered. The pack had already chosen the story. "The evidence is incontrovertible," he continued. "Your scent on his body, his blood beneath your claws. Witness testimony placing your wolf form fleeing the scene." Witness testimony. Her mouth tasted like metal. She forced her head up anyway, because if she was going to die, she would not do it with her eyes down. "Do you have anything to say?" Garen asked, like it was a formality. I didn't kill him, Vera said. Her voice scraped. She hadn't spoken since they dragged her from her quarters at dawn. Her throat felt bruised from swallowing panic. A laugh rose from the crowd, sharp, ugly, quick, not amusement. Dismissal. Garen lifted a hand, and the sound died. The pack always listened when he chose to be quiet. The evidence disagrees, he said. Then the evidence is wrong. This time, the laughter came like stones. Vera saw familiar faces, wolves she'd trained beside, shared meals with, stood shoulder to shoulder with on patrol. Wolves who'd once called her steady and reliable. Now they looked at her like she was a stain. Garen let it go on just long enough. Then he spoke again, and the clearing snapped back into stillness. Normally, he said, murder of a pack member carries an automatic death sentence. However, I have decided to be merciful. Merciful. Mercy meant you had value. Mercy meant you were worth sparing. Vera had never been worth much in Crescent Hollow. Low-ranked, young, no bloodline that mattered, so why now? You will be exiled, Garen said, as if reading a list. Stripped of protection, territory, and law. You will be considered rogue. Rogue. The crowd shifted. A packless wolf was a hungry wolf. A hungry wolf was a problem. Her heartbeat began to pound, slow and heavy. And to ensure you do not become a threat, Garen continued, you will be bound. Cold slid under Vera's skin. Bound? Her gaze flicked toward the healer at the edge of the platform. Marin, ancient and silent, hands folded like she'd been waiting longer than Vera had been alive. Then Garen turned his head toward the tree line. Bring him. The forest parted, and they dragged Cale Thorne into the clearing like a war trophy. He was taller than Vera remembered, broad through the shoulders, built like a weapon someone had used too many times. Dark hair fell into his eyes, empty in the way storms were empty, not calm, not soft, uncaring. Blood ran from a cut above his eyebrow, as if the woods itself had marked him. His wrists were bound too, silver rope biting into scarred skin. But he didn't fight, didn't plead, didn't look around like he needed to know who was watching. He already knew. Everyone knew. 5 years ago, he'd killed his father in front of half the pack. No trial, no warning. Just a body in the dirt and Cale standing over it, hands wet and red, like he'd finally stepped out of the role everyone had written for him. They exiled him, and then they kept him anyway. Because Alpha Garen had found a way to make a rogue into a leash. Cale was shoved down beside Vera, forced to his knees. For a moment, he didn't look at her, his gaze fixed forward, breathing slow and controlled, like he was somewhere else entirely. Then Garen spoke his name, and the air tightened. Cale Thorne, Garen said. Rogue, killer, debt-bound to this pack for the crime of patricide and the mercy of breathing. Cale's jaw flexed once. That was the only sign he was alive. You have lived on the borderlands for 5 years, Garen went on. Hunted our game, used our resources, occupied our land. You owe us, and today your debt comes due. No, Cale said. Quiet, rough, but it carried, because there were some voices you couldn't ignore even when they were soft. Garen smiled like he'd been waiting for that word. You don't have that option. I'm not taking a forced bond. The clearing stilled at that. Even the wolves who hated Cale liked watching him be made to kneel. Garen's smile widened. You don't get to refuse, he said. Neither does she. Vera's stomach dropped so hard she thought she might be sick. What does that mean? She whispered. Garen finally looked at her properly, like she was a tool he was about to use. It means I'm solving 2 problems with 1 solution, he said. You are both disposable, both rogues now, both threats if left uncontained. He gestured. Marin stepped forward. Her bare feet made no sound in the mud. Her hair was white as frost, her eyes sharp as a blade that had seen too many wars. Alpha, Marin said quietly. Are you certain? Once bound, it cannot be undone. I'm certain, Garen replied. Marin's gaze flicked to Kale, then to Vera. Something like pity crossed her face and was gone. She placed one cold palm to Vera's forehead, the other to Kale's. By blood and bone, Marin intoned, by moon and earth, by the laws that predate pack and territory, I bind you. Heat detonated in Vera's chest. Not clean pain, something drowning, warm and merciless, threading through Yarm's legs, bone. Vera tried to pull away. She couldn't. And then she felt him. Not thoughts, not words, presence. Like a door in her mind had been thrown open and ripped off its hinges. Kale. There. A weight. A storm. Marin stepped back, breath trembling faintly. It is done, she said. Vera stared at Kale. For the first time since he'd been dragged into the clearing, he looked at her. His gaze was dark, unreadable. But under it, something held tight. Exhaustion sharpened into restraint, like a man holding a blade by the wrong end because dropping it would cut them both. Garen's voice cut through the ringing in Vera's ears. Cut them loose. Get them out of my territory. The ropes fell away. Silver peeled off Vera's wrists, leaving angry burns and raw skin. She barely noticed. All she could feel was the new weight inside her chest. Heavy, foreign, permanent. Kale stood first. Vera tried to stand and failed, her legs folded under her like she'd been emptied out. Kale didn't help her. He turned toward the forest and started walking like the decision had already been made. And because something inside Vera pulled toward him like a compass needle, because the pack watched like hungry spectators, because she had nowhere else to go, Vera forced herself upright and followed her forced mate into the wilderness, soft, steady. Kale walked as if the forest belonged to him, not in the way an alpha claimed land with banners and laws, in the way a predator knew every root, every branch, every quiet path where the ground wouldn't betray you with noise. Vera stumbled behind him for 3 hours. When he drifted too far ahead, her breath grew tight, ribs cinching as if her body didn't approve the distance. When he slowed, even slightly, air returned to her lungs. The trees grew older as they traveled, thicker, wilder. The air changed too, less pack, more wilderness. Here, the undergrowth wasn't trimmed, the trails weren't maintained. This wasn't territory anyone wanted to claim because claiming meant responsibility. This was where things got thrown away. By the time the sun began to sink, Kale stopped in a small clearing. A cabin sat in the center. Cabin was generous. 4 walls and a crooked door and a roof that looked like it had survived storms out of spite. No windows, no chimney, just shelter. Kyle pushed the door open and stepped in. Vera paused at the threshold, the smell of old smoke and pine and solitude hitting her like a memory she'd never lived. Are you coming in or not? Kyle asked. His voice was rough, tired, not kind, not cruel, like kindness was a language he'd stopped speaking a long time ago. Vera stepped inside. The interior was sparse, bedroll in one corner, fire pit in the center, a crate against the wall. No second bed, no extra blanket, no softness. Kyle crouched by the crate, pulled out dried meat wrapped in cloth, and ate like survival was the only appetite he trusted. He didn't offer any. Vera's stomach cramped with hunger and humiliation. Kyle tossed the meat toward her without looking. It landed near her boots. Eat, he said. You'll need your strength. Vera picked it up slowly, burned wrists protesting. She bit down, tough, oversalted, nearly flavorless. She chewed anyway. Kale struck flint to steel. Sparks caught, flame rose. Warmth crawled into Vera's bones, and only then did she realize how cold she'd been. Kyle leaned against the far wall, eyes on the fire, not on her. Rules, he said. Vera's shoulders went tight. She waited. You sleep in that corner, he said, nodding toward the darkest space farthest from his bedroll. You don't touch my things. You don't leave the clearing without telling me. You don't shift without permission. You don't make noise at night. Vera swallowed. What happens if I do? Kayel's gaze lifted to hers. Flat, empty, but the air around him felt like a warning with a heartbeat. Nothing good, he said. That's not an answer. Kayel's mouth twitched. Not a smile, just a shadow of something bitter. It's the only one you're getting. Vera sank down in the corner, pulling her knees to her chest because her body was shaking and she refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing it. Why didn't you fight it? She asked, quieter. The bond. Kayel's eyes stayed on the fire. Fight what? This, Vera said, gesturing between them like it mattered, like anything could make it less real. You could have refused. No, Kayel said, edged. I couldn't. You said no to Garen. Words aren't refusal. Vera stared. What does that mean? He waited a beat, like he was deciding whether she was worth the air. It means Garen owns me, Kayel said. Has since the day I killed my father. I stay alive because I'm useful. The day I stop being useful, I'm dead. Vera's throat tightened. So you just let him do this? Kayel finally looked at her. You think you're the first thing he's used as leverage? He asked softly. Something old and scorched moved behind his stillness. Go to sleep, Vera, he said, and her name sounded like it cost him something. Vera lay on the cold floor, hard ground pressed into her hip bones. She closed her eyes. Rest didn't come. Every time Kayel shifted in his bedroll, her body reacted like it was being watched. Every time his breathing changed, her pulse followed. It was like sharing a room with a storm and being told to pretend the thunder wasn't for you. Around midnight, Kayel spoke into the darkness. Stop! Vera opened her eyes. Stop what? Your panic, he said low. It's loud. I'm not panicking. Yes, you are, Kayel replied, and it's keeping me awake. Vera sat up, thin blanket clutched around her shoulders. I didn't ask for this. Neither did I. Then why? Because it's done, Kayel cut in. The stillness cracked, just enough, and fighting it won't change anything. It'll only make us both suffer. Vera's chest ached. Her wrists burned. Her throat tightened with words she'd swallowed all day because saying them out loud felt like begging. I didn't kill Marcus, she whispered. Kayel didn't hesitate. I don't care. The words hit like a slap. You don't... I don't know you, Kayel said, colder now. I don't know Marcus. I don't know what you did or didn't do. I know Garen chose you as guilty, and now you're here. That's all. Vera stared into the dark, her breath thin. How can you be like that? Kayel was silent a long moment. Then he said, quieter, like truth was a weight he didn't enjoy carrying. Because caring gets you killed. He turned his back to her, and Vera swallowed the sound in her throat. Morning in the Outlands didn't feel like morning in pack territory. There were no patrol calls, no training bells, no voices. Just silence stretched thin over trees and cold air. Vera woke to the cabin door creaking open. Her body was stiff from the floor. Her mouth was dry. Her wrists throbbed. Kale was gone. For one heartbeat, panic flared. And then her ribs tightened, and she understood the direction without seeing him. East, not far. Vera exhaled shakily and stepped outside. Frost clung to the grass in the shadows. Somewhere nearby, water moved, soft and constant. Kyle returned from the tree line carrying a canvas sack. He dropped it near the door like it weighed nothing. Wash, he said. Vera blinked. Where? Kyle nodded east. Follow the sound. Don't go far. Then he went back inside. Vera followed the water and found a stream cutting through the trees, clear and cold enough to sting. She knelt and washed her face, her hands, her wrists. The burns looked angry, pink and blistered. Silver had marked her, like the pack needed proof she belonged to no one. When she returned, Kyle had relit the fire. The canvas sack sat beside him. He opened it. 3 rabbits, dead and stiff. You know how to clean game? Kyle asked. Vera swallowed. No. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Then vanished. Come here, he said. Vera knelt. Kyle showed her how to cut skin without tearing, how to peel, how to gut without ruining meat. His hands were quick, efficient, hands that looked like they'd done worse things than this. But he slowed when she struggled, corrected her without mocking, took the knife once when her fingers shook too much, then gave it back when she steadied. By the end, Vera's hands were covered in blood and fur. She ruined the first rabbit. The second was better. The third was almost competent. Kyle cooked the meat over the fire and handed her a skewer without looking at her. Vera's throat tightened. Thank you, she said. Kyle grunted, but something in the air eased, so slight she almost imagined it. Later, Kale stood and grabbed his knife. I'm checking the trap line, he said. Stay in the clearing, don't shift. Why? Vera asked. Kale paused at the door. Because you don't know the leash, he said flatly. Then he disappeared into the trees. Vera spent the afternoon pacing the clearing like a caged thing. The cabin was too quiet. The woods felt too big. Her mind kept circling Marcus's name like a tongue worrying a missing tooth. When Kale returned at dusk, he tossed a thick wool blanket toward her. You were cold last night, he said. Use it. Vera caught it, startled. What is this? She asked, because she didn't know how to accept softness without suspicion anymore. A blanket, Kale replied like she was exhausting. That night, as the fire died down and the cabin darkened, Kale spoke again. It has rules, he said. Vera's spine went tight. What kind of rules? The kind that kill you if you pretend they aren't real. He looked almost carved from shadow in the ember light. If you try to leave without me, he said, you'll get sick. If you go too far, you'll collapse. If you run... He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Vera's mouth went dry. How far is too far? Kale's jaw flexed. A mile. 2. I don't know. How do you know what happens? Vera demanded. Have you... Kale's gaze sharpened. I tried once, he said. Early, back when exile still sounded like freedom. I made it 3 miles before I couldn't breathe. Woke up 2 days later with Garen standing over me, reminding me I was still his. Vera's stomach turned. So you're a rogue, she whispered, but you're still his. Kyle's eyes went flat. That's what makes me the pack's rogue, he said. Exiled enough to be hated, owned enough to be useful. Vera stared into the embers, and the words slipped out before she could stop them. I didn't kill Marcus. Silence. Then, unexpectedly, I know, Kale said. Vera's head snapped up. You said you didn't care. I don't, Kale said, then quieter. But I don't think you did it. Hope flared in Vera's chest so fast it hurt. Why? She whispered. Kyle's gaze held hers, steady. Because killing someone leaves a mark, he said. You don't look marked, you look chaste. Vera's eyes stung. What if I don't remember because I'm a monster? She asked, the question tasting like blood. Kale's jaw tightened. There are ways, he said slowly, to steer a wolf. Old hands, old tricks. Vera's breath caught. You think someone controlled me? I think you were convenient, Kale said. Low-ranked, no family, easy to blame. Vera's hands curled into fists. So even if I prove it, it won't welcome you home, Kale finished, brutal honesty. You're done, Vera. The words hit like cold water. Kyle watched her for a moment, then quiet, almost like a thing he didn't mean to give. But staying alive can still be yours. Vera stared at him. Kyle leaned back, eyes closing. Sleep, he said, and stop screaming through my skull. Vera lay down, wool blanket pulled tight around her shoulders. The cabin creaked, the fire hissed. Somewhere outside, the creek kept moving, and for the first time since the trial, her body loosened enough to rest. Sleep didn't erase it. It only taught Vera what it felt like when the noise inside her stopped long enough for her body to remember it was still alive. She woke to ash-cold air and the crackle of Kael feeding the fire with one hand, like heat was a habit and habits were safer than comfort. Dawn hadn't fully arrived, just a gray seam where night began to split. Kael didn't look at her, but the cabin felt tighter than yesterday, as if the air itself had taken a step closer. Vera pushed upright, wincing when her burned wrists pulled. Kael's voice came without warning. "You're awake!" It wasn't a question. Vera rubbed her eyes. "You've been up." "I don't sleep much," Kael said. The fire popped. He fed it again. For a moment, the cabin held a fragile kind of peace, pine scent and low flame and two bodies learning the shape of forced proximity. Vera was almost stupid enough to believe it could last. Then her ribs cinched. Not distance, not hunger, something else. Kael went still. Vera's stomach dropped. "What is it?" Kael's gaze snapped to the door. The air tasted different, like iron under snow. He crossed the cabin in 2 strides and pulled the door open. Cold swept in. The clearing sat white and brittle with frost, the world holding its breath. At the tree line, nailed into bark, a strip of cloth fluttered. Pack colors. Crescent Hollow's mark burned into it like a brand. A message, a summons. Kael stared at it like it was a throat. Vera stepped to the threshold. The cold bit her bare toes. "Is that from them?" Kael didn't answer right away, then low. "Yes," Vera swallowed. "What does it mean?" "It means Garen is calling his leash." Vera's skin crawled. "Are you going?" Kael's jaw flexed once. "I am." "No," the word escaped her raw. Kael turned his head slowly, eyes dark and flat. Vera hated that her body reacted before her pride, breath tightening as if she were already being pulled south. "Go inside," Kael said. Vera didn't move. "What if he's calling you to—" "Enough." His voice sharpened just enough to cut. Vera's anger rose because fear was easier to swallow when it had teeth. "You can refuse." Kael held her gaze for a long moment. Then he stepped close and caught her wrist. Not hard. Certain. The contact sent heat through her chest like a struck match. Vera sucked in a breath. Kael's eyes narrowed. "Breathe." "Don't," Vera started. He leaned in, close enough that his voice became something private and dangerous. "Breathe," he repeated, slower. "Or it'll spill out of you so loud even the trees will hear." Vera forced air into her lungs. One breath, then another. Kael didn't release her until her shaking eased. Then he let go, turning away as if he hadn't just steadied her with his hand. "You're not going," Vera said again, smaller now. "You can't keep letting him. He doesn't need my permission," Kael said. Vera stared. "What does that mean?" "It means if I don't go," Kael said flatly, "he'll punish me through you." Ice in her veins. "He can— Yes." Vera looked at the cloth like it might explain how mercy turned into a weapon. "I'll stay here," she said, desperate for control. "You go. Kael went very still, and Vera felt it, pressure waking behind her ribs, not pain yet, a promise of it. Kael turned back, eyes dark. "When I cross the boundary, you'll get sick. When I get far enough, you'll drop. If you fight it—" His gaze flicked to her throat, like he could see the magic under skin. "It'll decide you'd rather die than disobey." Vera's mouth went dry. "So I'm going back." "You are." "I don't want to." Kael didn't soften, but something old and exhausted moved behind his stillness. Anger at a world that kept making choices for people and calling it law. "I know," he said quietly. "Pack your things. We leave in an hour." Vera stared at him. "Why are you bringing me into that place?" Kael's gaze turned south. "Because if Garen smells fear on you—" His mouth twisted. "He'll savor it." Kael stepped back into the cabin, reached into his coat, and set a worn leather cord on the crate. Vera stared at it. A collar? Scent dampener, Kale said. It'll blur you. Vera's throat tightened. Why would you? Because you're not going in there raw. He tied it around her throat himself, quick, practiced fingers. His knuckles brushed her skin. Vera's breath caught. Her body reacted like it was learning him by touch. Kyle paused one heartbeat, eyes flicking to her mouth, then away again, like looking too long would make him guilty of something he refused to name. Shift, he said. Vera went cold. Here? Now, fear spiked. Then she let the change take her, bone and heat, fur unfurling like a secret. Her wolf landed gray-brown and lean, built for endurance, not dominance. Kyle shifted a heartbeat later. His wolf was a black storm given weight, massive, scarred, the kind of predator that made the air feel smaller. He glanced at her once, an order without words. Then he moved. Vera followed, because something in her chest insisted, and because survival sometimes meant running beside what everyone else feared. They cut through trees toward Crescent Hollow. Frost broke beneath their paws. The forest thinned. Pack scent thickened the closer they got. Smoke, wolves, and the sharp metallic bite of silver wards buried under the soil like teeth. By midday, the territory line rose ahead, and beyond it, the world Vera had belonged to. She slowed at the ridge. Below, Crescent Hollow spread like a living organism, lodge at its heart, houses like ribs, training yard like a wound that never closed. Wolves moved in the open, comfortable in their cruelty. Vera's wolf flattened instinctively. Kyle's presence pressed against her like a steady hand. Stay close. He dipped his muzzle to her shoulder, brief, deliberate, not affection, a mark. Something in Vera's chest flared hot, dizzying, like her body recognized the gesture before her mind could. Kale descended. Vera followed. The yard went quiet the moment they stepped out of the tree line. Heads turned, conversations died. Then the murmurs began, small and sharp, spreading like rot. That's her. The murderer, bound to Kyle. Kyle didn't flinch. He walked through the center of them like a storm through grass, uncaring of what bent beneath it. Vera kept her eyes down because looking up would make it real. It didn't help. Wolves drifted closer as they passed, just enough to be seen doing it, just enough to make her feel surrounded. Scent pressed at her, pack judgment, pack hunger. A familiar voice cut through the hush. Well, Vera's stomach dropped. Alpha Garen stood on the lodge steps with his hands clasped behind his back like he was welcoming guests instead of collecting property. He smiled at Kale. It wasn't warmth. It was ownership. Kale Thorne, Garen called. You came quickly. Kale stopped at the base of the steps. Vera stopped half a pace behind him, instinct tucking her into his shadow. Kale's voice was flat. You left your mark. Garen's eyes slid past Kale and landed on Vera, slow, satisfied. Of course I did, Garen said. I wanted to be sure you understood the urgency. Garen looked back at Kale. We have a situation. Kale didn't respond. Garen smiled wider, enjoying the silence the way he enjoyed a knife pressed where it hurt. A small group of rogues has been sighted near our eastern line, he said. They've taken game, frightened border wolves, made noise. Kale's jaw tightened. Send your patrol. And risk my people? Garen's voice stayed pleasant. You're better suited for problems we don't want our hands on. He leaned forward slightly, voice lowering like a secret shared in public. That's why I kept you alive. Something hot surged behind Vera's eyes, Kale's reaction bleeding into her like heat through cloth. Then Garen added almost casually, and bring your bondmate. Vera's head snapped up. The crowd reacted instantly, interest sharpening, cruelty brightening, wolves hungry for spectacle. Kyle shifted, subtle, immediate, placing himself more directly between Vera and the pack. His voice went quiet. No. Garen's smile thinned.
Yes.
She's not trained, Kyle said.
Trained enough to kill Marcus,
Someone muttered. A ripple of laughter. Vera's cheeks burned, her throat closed. Kyle didn't look at the speaker. He looked at Garen. She is under my protection, Kyle said. The words landed in the yard like a thrown stone. The murmurs changed shape. Garen's brows rose as if amused. Protection, he repeated. Or another leash around your throat? Kyle didn't answer. Garen's gaze slid to Vera. Fine, he said smoothly. Handle the rogues alone. Relief hit Vera, twisted with dread.
Remember, Vera Ashford,
Garen called after her, voice carrying.
You have no pack here.
The wolves watched like she was something waiting to be broken. Kyle's hand reached back. He took Vera's hand. Warm, firm, public. Vera's breath caught. Not because it was gentle, because it was a claim. Kyle didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to.
If you touch her,
he said, calm as falling snow,
I'll tear this pack apart looking for what's left of your pride.
Silence crashed down. Even the torches seemed to listen. They left with eyes on their backs. Only when the trees swallowed the lodge smoke did Kyle release her hand. Vera's fingers tingled where his had been, like bruised skin remembering pressure. You shouldn't have said that, Vera blurted, because if she didn't speak, her chest would keep replaying it. Kyle didn't look at her. Said what? Protection, Vera said. You made it worse. Kyle's mouth twisted. I made it clear. That's worse. Kyle stopped and turned, eyes cutting into her. Clear is the only language packs respect. Vera swallowed. Do you mean it? Kale held her gaze, then low. I mean you live. Not romance. A promise carved into survival. They pushed east, deeper into boundary woods where wards thinned and law got quieter. By midday, the air changed. Not colder, sharper, as if the forest had stopped blinking. Kyle slowed, lifted a hand, stopping her without touching. Vera's skin prickled. What? Kale crouched, pressed 2 fingers to the ground. His eyes narrowed. Too quiet. Vera listened. No birds, no small scuttle of life. Even wind moved carefully, as if it didn't want to be noticed. Kyle's gaze swept the trees. Shift. Vera's stomach dropped. Now? Do you want to be slow or alive? That did it. Vera let the change take her. Wolf lungs, wolf ears. The world snapped into scent and motion. Kyle shifted too, black storm beside her. They moved down a shallow ravine where branches braided overhead like a roof. And then the scent hit. Wrong wolves. 4, unwashed, hungry, blood-laced. Kale stopped. Vera stopped close, instinct tugging her inward. A voice came from the shadows, human, mocking. Well, a man called, look what the pack sent. He stepped out first, tall, gaunt, eyes too bright. Behind him, 2 more figures emerged. Then a woman limping slightly, scar splitting one corner of her mouth into permanent cruelty. 4 rogues, not a small group, a setup. Kyle didn't shift back. His growl rolled low. The man smiled wider. They really keep you on a chain, don't they? Pack's favorite monster. The scarred woman's gaze slid past Kale to Vera. Her grin sharpened. And he brought a pretty little leash. The man lifted his hands, placating in gesture, predatory in eyes. Easy, Thorn. We don't want to fight. Kyle took 1 step forward. Vera's instincts screamed, liar. The woman's eyes narrowed. We only want what's owed. Kale's voice came rough, human words forced through wolf throat by will. Speak. The man leaned in slightly. We want Crescent Hollow's healer. Vera went cold. Marin. Kale went still. She doesn't leave the pack, Kale said. The woman laughed thinly. Everyone leaves something. Sometimes it's territory, sometimes it's their spine. The man's gaze flicked to Vera. We're not here for you, he said softly, But if the pack won't hand the healer over? His smile sharpened. We'll take payment another way. Kale lunged. Everything exploded. The man shifted mid-motion, bones snapping, fur erupting. The ravine filled with wolves and teeth and the sharp stink of fear. Kale hit the first rogue like a thrown boulder, black body slamming into gray, jaws flashing. 2 rogues peeled off, not for Kale, for Vera. Vera's heart slammed. One lunged. Vera dodged late, teeth grazing her shoulder. Pain flared bright. Kael's roar tore through the ravine. Vera tried to steady, training, angles, stance, but this wasn't training. This was hunger. The second rogue circled behind her. Vera pivoted, snapping, catching fur, not flesh. They were trying to wear her down, trying to make her panic. Vera dug claws into frozen earth. No, she couldn't be the weak link. The rogue lunged again. Vera let it. At the last second, she dropped low, took the momentum, slammed her shoulder into its chest. They hit the ground, tangled. Vera bit down hard on its foreleg. Hot blood filled her mouth. The rogue yelped, twisting. Vera held on. A command hit her like a hand between her shoulder blades. Stay alive. Vera tore sideways. The rogue howled, stumbled back, limping, blood pouring. Vera rose, chest heaving. And the second rogue came again. Vera didn't wait. She charged, hit it head on, claws raked, teeth snapped, pain bloomed along her side, sharp, bright, but she kept moving, kept fighting like if she stopped the world would swallow her, because it would. Behind her, Kael's roar changed into something worse, a killing sound. Vera glanced. Kael had one rogue pinned, jaws at its throat, one twist and it went limp. Kael lifted his head, blood slick on his muzzle, eyes blazing. For one heartbeat, Vera saw him the way Crescent Hollow saw him. Monster, storm, weapon. Then his gaze snapped to her, needle sharp. A single warning hit Vera's ribs. Behind you! Vera spun. The scar-mouthed woman had shifted back to human form, fast, knife in hand. Silver. The scent hit like a wall. Vera's body froze for the smallest fatal fraction. The woman smiled, triumphant. There you are! She lunged. Kael moved like a nightmare. He crossed the space in a blur and slammed into her, knocking the knife away. Silver flashed, skittered over frozen earth. Kael's hands closed around the woman's throat and lifted her like she weighed nothing. She choked, eyes wide, feet kicking. Kael's face was blood-smeared. His eyes were too dark. Vera shifted back in a rush, human limbs returning clumsy, ribs aching, breath tearing. Kael, she rasped. The air felt on fire. Kael's grip tightened. The woman gurgled. Kael could end her. Vera felt the pull of ending, felt it in him and horrifyingly in herself, because fear wanted certainty, and certainty was death delivered clean. Kael, Vera said again, voice breaking. Don't! His gaze flicked to her. For a heartbeat, he didn't recognize her. Then he blinked, once, and something snapped into place. Control. He dropped the woman. She hit the ground, coughing, clawing at her throat, scrambling backward. Kael stood over her, chest heaving. Why, Marin? Kael's voice came out rough. The woman spit blood and laughed wetly. Because she knows things. Kael's eyes narrowed. About bonds. The woman's gaze slid to Vera. About yours. Vera's stomach clenched. Kael's voice dropped. Who told you she could be taken? The woman's grin sharpened. An alpha who likes clean hands. The world went cold. Kael went still. Certainty settled like ice. Garen, the rogues weren't random. This was a message, a test, a trap. Kael's voice came quiet. He sent me to be killed. The woman laughed. Or broken. Same thing. Kael's gaze didn't leave her. You won't survive long enough to enjoy that. He turned away like she was nothing, grabbed Vera's arm, hauled her close. Not gentle, grounding. We go back, he said. Vera's throat tightened. To Crescent Hollow? Yes. They'll... I know. His grip tightened a fraction, as if holding her still was the only thing keeping his rage from tearing loose.
But this time,
He said, voice low.
I'm not going back alone.
They didn't take the path. Kyle led them through outer trees where scent broke and wards thinned, moving with the ruthless efficiency of someone who'd been hunted most of his life. Vera shifted when she had to. Human. Wolf. Human again. Each change left her shaky, bruised, raw. By dusk, her wounds burned. Her side throbbed. Her shoulder ached. Kyle finally stopped in a deep hollow where wind couldn't reach. He shifted back, dropped to a crouch in front of her like his body had decided rage could wait, but her blood couldn't.
You're bleeding,
he said. Vera touched her side. Fingers came away red. It's not... Sit. Vera sat because her legs were shaking and because his tone left no space for argument. Kyle pressed cloth to her wound. Vera hissed. Hold still. I am, Vera snapped, and hated how thin she sounded. He wrapped the cloth tighter than necessary, hands steady and fast. The closeness made Vera's skin feel too tight. She could smell him, blood and pine and smoke and something purely kale that made her body want to exhale. Why did you stop? Vera whispered. When you had her? Kyle's hands paused one beat. Then he kept rapping, gaze not lifting. Because you said my name. Vera blinked. You did, Kale said, voice rough, and it pulled me back. Vera's throat closed. Kale stood, exhaled slow. They wanted me to kill in front of you, he said. They wanted you to believe the story they tell. Vera's voice cracked. And you didn't. Kale's laugh was bitter. Don't confuse restraint with mercy. Vera looked up. Then what is it? Kale stared at her a long moment.
It's mine, he said finally. The only thing that ever was.
Vera swallowed. And if you lose it? Kale's eyes darkened. His voice dropped, intimate and lethal.
Then everyone bleeds.
He looked away.
We go back after dark, he said. Not through the main gate.
Vera's stomach turned. Why go back at all? Kyle's gaze sharpened.
Because they'll keep coming.
Then quieter, forced through clenched teeth.
Because you want your memory.
Vera froze.
Don't you?
He asked. Her eyes burned. Yes, she whispered. Kale nodded once. Then we make Marin speak. Night made Crescent Hollow look softer from the edge of the trees. Lodge lights glowed warm. Smoke rose gentle. Lies always looked like safety from a distance. Kyle led Vera along the territory's edge where patrols grew lazy and arrogance ran thicker than discipline. They moved between trunks and shadow, silent as intent. Marin's house sat near the creek, isolated, tucked away like the pack's secrets. A candle burned inside. Someone moved behind the curtain. Kyle stopped behind a thicket and leaned in close, voice near Vera's ear. If this goes wrong, you run to the creek and you stay in the water. Vera swallowed. Why water? Wards don't cling as well when they're wet, Kale murmured. Scent breaks, magic stutters. Vera stared at him. How do you know that? Kale didn't look away from the house. Because I've been trying to die for 5 years. The words punched the air out of Vera's lungs. Before she could answer, Kyle moved. He crossed the yard and kicked the door in. The sound cracked through the quiet like a bone snapping. Vera surged forward. Inside, Marin stood in the center of her small kitchen, candlelight carving sharp lines into her face. She wasn't startled. That chilled Vera more than any scream. Marin looked resigned. As expected, Marin said quietly. Kale stepped in like a storm entering a church.
How long have you been bending bonds?
He demanded. Marin's gaze slid to Vera. Something like sorrow flickered. Quick, swallowed. Child, Marin said softly, I told you it could not be undone. Vera's throat tightened. You didn't tell me you could steer me. Marin didn't deny it. Kale moved closer. The air tightened with him. "You touched me during the binding," Kael said, "and you flinched. Why?" Marin's lips pressed together. "Because you are not simple." Kael's eyes narrowed. "Answer." Marin's hands trembled as she lifted a kettle from the stove, a domestic motion that looked obscene against Kael's fury. "It wasn't meant to become this," she said. Vera's voice broke. "Then what was it meant to be?" Marin hesitated. Kael's patience snapped. He slammed the kettle onto the table. It rattled hard enough to make the candle flame shiver. "Enough!" he snarled. "Tell us!" Marin flinched. Vera saw it. Real fear. Not fear of pain, fear of what would happen if she spoke. Marin's gaze flicked to the door, as if expecting someone to step through. "Garen has—" she started. The air changed. Pressure, sudden and heavy. Vera's skin prickled. Kael went rigid. A voice drifted from outside, smooth as polished stone. "Breaking into the healer's home is a serious offense, Kael." Alpha Garen stepped into the doorway, 2 enforcers behind him, silver chains coiled in their hands like snakes. Garen smiled like he'd been invited. Kael's shoulders tightened. Vera's stomach dropped. "You set us up," Kael said. Garen's brows lifted. "Did I?" Kael's eyes went dark. "The rogues wanted Marin. They said you told them she knew things." "Rogues say many things," Garen replied, calm. "They said you wanted me broken." A flicker, so small it was almost nothing, moved in Garen's eyes. Then he sighed, as if bored. "Kael," he said, "you are always one bad decision away from becoming exactly what the pack fears." Kael's mouth twisted. "Stop pretending you fear me." Garen's smile thinned. "I don't fear you," he said softly. "I manage you." Marin went pale. Garen looked at her. "Healer," he said calmly. "What is he accusing you of?" Marin's lips parted, and Vera felt it. A pressure behind her eyes, a hand on her mind, steering. Vera gasped, clutching her head. Kael's head snapped toward her. "Vera!" Garen's voice stayed mild. "Ah," he said. "There it is." Vera's vision blurred. Her body moved without permission. Her hand lifted. A silver knife on Marin's counter caught the candlelight. Her fingers reached for it. "No!" Vera choked, fighting herself. The force pushed harder. Kael roared and lunged. Silver chains snapped out. The enforcers moved fast, blocking him. Kael slammed into them like he didn't care what it cost. Vera's hand closed around Silver. Agony flared in her wrist. Her body didn't care. It raised the knife, pointed it, not at Garen, at Kael. Terror ripped through Vera so hard her stomach lurched. Kael broke through a chain, took another across his chest, kept coming. He reached her and caught her wrist mid-strike. Silver burned them both. Vera screamed. Kael's face was inches from hers, eyes wild with fury and something worse, fear, not for himself. "Vera," he said, voice like gravel. "Look at me." Vera sobbed. "I can't." "Yes, you can," Kael snarled. "You're in there. Fight it." His grip tightened, anchoring her in pain and touch, giving her body something real to cling to. And then the memory hit. Not gently, like drowning. Marcus in the trees. Marcus laughing, calling her steady. A shadow behind him. A scent layered over her own. Bitter herbs. Smoke. Marin's hands at her temples. A word in an old tongue. And then Vera's body moving while her mind screamed. Claws sinking into Marcus's throat. His eyes wide with betrayal he didn't understand. Her own scream trapped behind her teeth. Vera's knees buckled. The knife clattered to the floor. She choked on a sob that tasted like blood. Kael caught her. Garen's smile widened. "There we are," he said, pleased. "The truth, at last." Vera's voice broke. You made me." Garen tilted his head. "We needed a story," he said, simple as weather. "Marcus was asking questions. His death needed an ending the pack would swallow. Vera shook, breath tearing. Why? Garen's gaze went distant, almost bored. Because Marcus found out who my real problem is. Kyle went still. Marin's face crumpled like something finally breaking. Garen's eyes returned to Kyle, and the smile sharpened. You, he said softly. Kyle's voice came low. You killed him because he knew you were using me. Garen shrugged. He knew I couldn't keep you without leverage, he said. So I made leverage. Vera's nails dug into Kyle's coat, her body clinging because her mind was falling apart. Garen's gaze slid to her. Now, he said. Hand her over. Kyle's answer was instant. No. Garen's smile thinned. Then I'll make her kill you. The room went silent. Vera's blood ran cold. Kyle's jaw flexed. His voice went dangerously calm. Try. Garen's eyes glittered. You won't burn my pack, he murmured. You're leashed, and your leash is shaking in your arms. Kyle looked down at Vera, at her broken breath, her guilt, her terror. Something in him made a decision so hard Vera felt it like a door slamming shut. He lifted his head and smiled, cold, terrifying. You're right, Kyle said. Garen's brows rose, victory starting to form. I won't burn your pack, Kale continued. Relief flickered across Garen's face. Kale's voice dropped into a murmur of ruin. I'll take it from you. Kyle moved, fast, not wild, precise. He slammed one enforcer into the wall, wrenched the chain free, pivoted as the other lunged. A shoulder to the gut, a head to the counter. Wood cracked, candle wax spilled. Garen stepped back, eyes cold. Kyle didn't go for him, not yet. He leaned in close enough that only Garen could hear him. You wanted a weapon, Kale murmured. Here it is. Then Kale grabbed Vera's hand and hauled her into the night. Not because it was gentle, because it was public. Because the pack needed to see what Garen couldn't keep. Outside, air hit Vera like a slap. Cold, wet, real. Kyle didn't slow until the creek swallowed the house lights and the trees swallowed the sound of pursuit. Vera stumbled, choking on sobs. Kale! Quiet, he said. But it wasn't cruelty. It was command. He pulled her into a hollow where the wind couldn't find them, pressed her back against a trunk, and held her there with his body between her and the world. Vera's hands shook so hard she couldn't hide it. I remember, she whispered, and it came out like a confession she didn't want. Kyle's eyes didn't soften, but they held. I killed him, Vera said. It was my claws, It was your body, Kale cut in low, not your choice. Vera laughed once, broken. Does it matter? He's still dead. Kale stepped closer. It matters, he said rough, because guilt will eat you alive, and I won't watch it do that. Vera's throat closed. How do you live with yours? Kyle went still. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then quietly, I don't. The honesty hit harder than comfort. Vera swayed. Kyle reached out, hesitated, then cupped the back of her neck, thumb pressing once like a grounding point. We end this, he said. Vera swallowed. How? Kyle's gaze lifted through the branches to the moon, pale and indifferent. By making the pack look, he said. Vera's breath hitched. They won't. Kale's voice dropped, intimate and lethal. They will if the moon makes them. Vera stared. Truth-binding. Kyle nodded once. Then he tipped his head back and howled. The sound tore across Crescent Hollow like thunder. A call, a challenge, a demand the pack couldn't ignore. Howls answered in the distance. Feet pounded, torches flared, and Vera stood shaking beside the pack's monster while the world began to turn toward them. The old council clearing filled the way storms filled valleys, inevitable. Wolves poured in with torchlight and suspicion, with hunger for spectacle they wouldn't name. They came ready to see Kyle punished. ready to see Vera break. Kyle stood in the center like he belonged there. Vera stood a step behind him, shaking, arms wrapped around herself because her skin felt too thin for the night. The stones underfoot were old. They held memory the way bone held pain. Garen arrived last. Of course he did. He stepped into the ring of torchlight, calm and perfect, eyes sweeping the crowd as if he still owned every breath here. Then he saw Kyle beside Vera, unbowed, and something in his expression tightened. Not fear, annoyance, like a tool had moved without permission.
"You have no right to summon my pack,"
Garen called. Kale's voice carried, flat and stiasi.
"Old law says any wolf can call the moon to witness truth."
Murmurs rippled. Garen's smile sharpened.
"And what truth do you bring, monster?"
Kale stepped forward. The torches popped. The night listened.
"Marcus Thorne was murdered,"
Kale said. Silence. Garen's eyes narrowed. Kale continued.
"Vera didn't choose it. Her mind was forced."
The pack erupted in murmurs, disbelief, anger.
"Lies,"
Garen said smoothly.
"Desperate lies."
Kale didn't blink. "I invoke truth-binding." A collective inhale. Truth-binding was old, rare, not just accusation, ritual, the kind that cracked reputations like bone. Garen's smile thinned.
"You don't have a healer willing to perform it."
Kale's gaze shifted to the edge of the crowd. Maren. A hush fell. Maren stepped forward. Her face was pale. Her hands trembled. Garen's voice snapped. "Healer!" Maren flinched. Vera's stomach twisted. Maren looked at Vera, really looked, and something in her face broke. "I served the wrong man," Maren whispered. Shock moved through the pack like wind through dry leaves. Garen's smile vanished. Maren stepped into the circle and began the old words. The stones hummed. The air thickened, as if the night inhaled and held it. Maren's voice rose, shaking but clear. "I bound them, by Alpha's order." Gasps. Vera's knees went weak. Kale's hand closed around hers, firm, steady, anchoring. Maren swallowed hard. "I steered Vera Ashford's wolf," she said. "I placed her scent on Marcus. I made her body strike." The pack recoiled. Vera tasted bile. Garen took one step forward. "Enough!" The stones flared. Truth-binding held. Garen's mouth snapped shut like he'd hit a wall. The pack stared. At Maren, at Vera, at Garen. Maren's eyes shone wet. "Marcus died because he learned the Alpha's secret." The clearing went dead quiet. Kale's voice was low. "Say it." Maren's lips trembled. Then she spoke. "Alpha Garen has been debt-binding Kale Thorne for 5 years," she said, "using old magic to keep him owned. And when Marcus discovered it, when he threatened to speak, Garen ordered his death." Shock hit the pack like a wave. Garen's face went perfectly still. Then, slowly, he smiled. Not warm, not kind, a smile like fire deciding to spread.
"You want to believe a healer's guilt and a rogue's theater?"
he asked, voice smooth. His gaze slid to Kyle.
"You think this makes you free?"
Then he looked at Vera, and the pressure slammed behind her eyes. Vera gasped. Her arm jerked upward. Her body lurched. Kyle moved instantly, yanking her back against him, arm around her waist like iron. "No!" Vera choked, fighting the force. The pack recoiled, murmuring. Kale's mouth hit her ear, voice like a snarl. "Fight it!" "I'm trying," Vera sobbed. The pressure intensified. Kale locked her wrist down, forcing her arm to her side, and the stones flared again. Because the pack could see it now. Vera's body moving against her will. Vera crying, fighting herself. Kyle holding her like he was the only thing keeping her from becoming a weapon. And packs can forgive cruelty when it's honest, but packs hate being owned. Kale lifted his head, voice carrying like a blade.
"This is what he does," he said. "This is his law."
Garen's control hit resistance. Vera screamed. Kale roared, half-shift, power surging under skin. The stones flared. Marin stumbled, and for the first time, Garen's eyes widened, just a flicker, because his grip was slipping. Kael pressed his forehead to Vera's. A claim, a vow, a declaration made without softness. "You don't get her," Kael said, low and absolute. "You don't get to use her. You don't get to break her." Something inside Vera shattered, and the pressure behind her eyes broke like glass. Vera collapsed, sobbing. Kael caught her. The crowd surged, voices rising. Garen stepped back, scanning faces, calculating, and noticing too late the loyalty draining out of the air. Kael stood, keeping Vera behind him. Garen's voice cut sharp. "You'll regret this." Kael's eyes were black storm. "I already did." Then Kael pointed at him. "Challenge," Kael said. The clearing exploded. Gasps, shouts. A challenge meant blood. "You are rogue," Garen snarled. Kael's voice stayed calm. "Old law says any wolf can challenge an alpha who breaks sacred law." Garen's gaze swept the pack. He found hesitation. He found disgust. He found wolves looking away. Refusing meant weakness. So Garen lifted his chin. "Fine," he said. "I accept." Vera's stomach dropped. Kael turned slightly toward her. A single message pressed into her ribs, steady as stone. "Stay behind me." Vera shook, barely able to stand, guilt and terror choking her. "I can't let you," she whispered. Kael didn't look at her. He didn't need to. They shifted. Kael first, Black Wolf exploding into the circle like a storm given teeth. Garen shifted a heartbeat later, larger than most, gray-white, impressive in the way meant to signal authority. The pack held its breath. Vera stood at the edge, shaking so hard her teeth chattered, hands clenched until her nails bit skin. Kael looked at her once. Command, promise. Then he attacked. The fight wasn't ceremony. It was real. Kael didn't waste motion. He went for tendons, weak points, angles. He fought like a wolf who'd survived worse than losing. Garen fought with confidence, strong, forceful, used to wolves backing down. Kael didn't back down, because Kael had already lived through the worst of it. Garen's claws raked Kael's shoulder. Pain jolted through Vera's ribs like lightning. Vera flinched hard, palms pressed to her chest as if she could hold it in. Kael didn't slow. He drove Garen backward, snapped at his throat, forced him to react instead of command. Garen stumbled. The pack's murmurs rose, changing into something like disbelief. Garen lunged for Kael's throat. Kael twisted, slammed his weight into Garen's side. They hit the ground in a tangle of fur and snapping teeth. Kael's jaws locked around Garen's foreleg. A crunch like breaking branch. Garen yelped, raw sound of pain. Kael dragged him across the snow like authority meant nothing without belief. Then Kael released and lunged again. Garen tried to rise. Kael hit him and pinned him. For one heartbeat, the clearing was silent except Kael's breath. His jaws hovered at Garen's throat. One bite, one twist, and it would be done. The pack watched. Vera watched. Garen's eyes met Kael's. Fear flickered there. Kael held still. Vera felt the pull of ending, felt it in him, and in the pack, too. Everyone wanted a clean finish to a messy truth. Kael's jaw flexed. Then he lifted his head. He did not kill him. He stepped back. The murmurs turned confused. Kael shifted back to human form, chest heaving, blood streaked across his face. Garen shifted too, human, shaking, wounded, rage trembling under his skin. Kael's voice carried across the clearing. "I won," he said. Silence answered. Kael looked over them. Wolves who'd laughed at Vera, wolves who'd watched her be bound, wolves who'd stayed quiet because quiet was safer. "Old law says an alpha who breaks sacred law is stripped," Kael said. Garen opened his mouth. Kael lifted a hand. Silence. And the pack, horrifyingly, listened. Not because Kyle wore a crown, because he'd proven something older than title, strength with restraint. Kyle turned toward Marin. "Break it!" Marin's hands shook. I don't know if—" "You made it," Kale said. "Undo it." Marin stepped forward, trembling, and knelt in the snow between them. Vera's stomach churned. Marin looked up at Vera, tears shining. "I'm sorry," she whispered. It didn't bring Marcus back. It didn't erase anything. But it mattered that Marin finally looked like someone carrying a crime instead of hiding behind law. Marin raised her hands, spoke old words to the moon and the stones. The air tightened. Vera felt it, something threaded through the magic like poison, reacting. Marin's voice cracked. "By witness and law, what was bound in tyranny is undone in truth." Kael stepped forward, eyes locked on Garen. "You don't own me," Kael said. The words hit the clearing like an oath. Marin pushed the ritual harder. "My father's death is mine," Kael continued. "My punishment is mine. My life is mine." The air trembled. Vera clutched her ribs as the magic convulsed. Pain flashed hot and white. Kael staggered too, jaw clenched, refusing to fall. Marin's hands shook violently. "By witness and law, I sever the debt." Something snapped. Not the bond between Vera and Kael, something else. A hidden leash. It tore free like a thorn yanked from flesh. Vera gasped as the pain dropped into stunned silence. Kyle lifted his head slowly. His eyes looked different, less haunted, more present. Garen stared, breath ragged, because he felt it too. The moment his control slipped off Kyle's throat. Kyle turned toward Vera. That weight between them was still there, still real. But without the leash inside it, it felt, terrifyingly, like a choice waiting to be made. Kyle stepped closer, hands hovering, then settling on either side of her face with careful steadiness. "Vera," he said. Her voice broke. "I killed him." Kyle's jaw flexed. "You were used. But he still died with my claws." Kyle's eyes darkened with something fierce. "Then we carry it," he said, "and we don't let them do it again." Vera swallowed. "What happens now?" Kyle looked over the pack, wolves staring like they'd never seen their world naked before. Kyle's voice carried. "Crescent Hollow doesn't need another puppet master." Murmurs rose, uncertain, fearful, hungry for structure. Kyle didn't reach for it. He looked at Vera. "I won't be your alpha," he said. Shock rippled. Garen's face twisted. Kyle continued, voice steady. "I don't want your lodge. I don't want your throne." His gaze held Vera's. "I want what was stolen," he said quietly. Vera swallowed. "What was stolen?" Kyle's thumb brushed her cheekbone, brief, grounding. "Choice," he said. Then he turned back to the pack. "I claim her," Kyle said. The crowd inhaled. Vera's heart slammed. Kyle's voice didn't waver. "Not as a weapon, not as punishment, as mine because I choose it, and she chooses it." He looked at Vera then, eyes dark, controlled. A question offered without pressure. Vera's throat tightened. Vera stepped forward until her chest brushed his. Her voice shook. "I choose." Kale's jaw flexed. "Say it louder," he murmured. Vera gripped his coat and lifted her chin toward the wolves who had thrown her away. "I choose him," Vera said, voice breaking but clear. "And I choose myself." Silence. Then, slowly, some heads bowed. Not all, but enough. Enough to change the shape of Crescent Hollow. Kale pressed his forehead to Vera's again. A vow without softness, full of reverence. "You're not theirs," he murmured. "Not ever again." They didn't stay for the aftermath. Kale didn't want a throne, and he didn't want the blood that came with holding one. Power always demanded payment. Kyle was done paying for other people's hunger. Before dawn, While the pack argued and alliances shifted like ice cracking, Kale took Vera's hand and walked away. Not running. Walking. A deliberate exit. A refusal to be chased like prey. Vera expected someone to stop them, to drag her back, to punish her for daring to breathe without permission. But the pack parted. Some stared, some looked away. Some watched with something like awe, like they'd just witnessed a law older than their banners. At the edge of the trees, Vera stopped. Kyle turned, a question in his eyes. Vera's throat tightened. I don't know how to live with what I did. Kyle's gaze didn't soften, but it steadied. Then don't live with it alone, he said. Vera swallowed. Are we leaving? Kale's eyes went to the horizon. Borderlands, wilderness, space without law. Yes, he said. We make our own. Vera exhaled, trembling. Kale lifted the leather cord from her throat, slow. Careful, fingers brushing her skin like he was learning reverence in a language he didn't trust. He held it for a moment, then let it drop into the snow. A symbol discarded. Kale reached into his coat and pulled out a strip of dark cloth, plain, black, unmarked. Vera stared at it. Kale's jaw flexed, like he hated ceremony but understood what it did to the world. This isn't a crown, Kale said. It's not a chain. He held it out. It's a vow, he said. If you take it, you're not packless. Vera's eyes burned. Kyle's gaze held hers, steady. By choice, he said, voice rough. Vera reached out with shaking hands and took the cloth. The moment her fingers closed around it, her chest warmed, no longer a stone, a pulse, a living thing. Kale stepped close, hand rising to the back of her neck, thumb pressing once. They can call me monster, he murmured. Let them. His voice dropped, vow-like, carved into bone. But they don't get to touch what's already mine, he said. Not anymore. Vera's breath hitched. She lifted her hands and held his face, scarred, real. Then don't leave me, she whispered, fierce and shaking. Kale's eyes darkened with something that looked almost like pain. I won't, he said. Not pretty. Law. Then he kissed her. Not gentle, not cruel. A claim made with restraint, like he was anchoring her to the world and anchoring himself to something other than rage. When they broke apart, Kyle rested his forehead to hers. We go, he said. Vera nodded. They turned toward the wilderness, and behind them, Crescent Hollow would spend years pretending it had always been civilized, even as the moon remembered the night their alpha was exposed. And their monster walked away with his mate alive beside him.